So it seems as though Gigi Donnarumma is going to be leaving PSG this summer. And well, there's a lot to talk about. There is a lot to talk about. Not only is Donnarumma going to be leaving, but it seems like PSG is about to sign 𝙀𝙀𝘖𝘾𝘼𝘖 from Lille. And yeah, I want to get my thoughts on it. There's a lot to talk about. And so let's get on to the video. But if you go and you look at first and foremost, Donnarumma, as it stands here, this is for 𝙀𝙀𝘖𝘾𝘼𝘖, a pretty reputable PSG insider, says Gianluigi Donnarumma has not yet left, even though his agents are exploring the market to find him a new destination. The Italian keeper has options. Manchester United, Manchester City, Galatasaray, and Saudi clubs are interested. However, he remains attached to PSG, will only leave if a project fully suits him. Internally, the possibility of seeing Chevalier and Donnarumma compete with Luis Enrique making the final decision is not ruled out. So, as it stands, and I'll actually go on and get onto the post made by about 𝙀𝙀𝘖𝘾𝑼𝘖𝘖𝘋, is once again, here you go, by our good old man Fabrizio Romano. Paris Saint-Germain are in final stages of 𝙀𝙀𝘖𝘾𝑼𝘖𝑗 deal. Here we go soon. 40 million deal being reported directly between Presidents Al-Khelaifi and Letang, as Lille asked for more add-ons, but very close. Chevalier accepted a 5-year deal last week. So apparently, seemingly with 𝙀𝙀𝘖𝘾𝑼𝘖𝘖𝑗, the deal's done for 40 million, 5-year contract. And it seems like he's going to be a PSG keeper next season. Now, here's to see whether or not he is going to be, a starter or whatnot, because it's going to be depending on Donnarumma. But to go into give my just sort of general thoughts on this, I think if like the TLDR is, if it does happen, it's not a bad thing. But I do think that if you ask me right now, based on what happened at the end of the season, I think we need to keep Donnarumma. Like, yes, we can't also, you have to think about it from the PSG perspective. Donnarumma, if you're being honest, the first 4 years, right, he's been here since 2021. For a majority of those 4 years, he's not been what we expected him to be. He had last year, I remember, had a really good campaign in the league. He's been, generally speaking, pretty good in the league. But in the Champions League games, and specifically the big Champions League games, he's left you a lot to want, right? So he's not been really all that good. However, what you do have to take into account, though, is that these last, 6 months, 5 months, basically ever since he got that, massive injury by Singo in the Liga against Monaco, he's been stellar. He's been absolutely impeccable. And it's like, my general sentiment on this is that it comes back to the old adage of sometimes, again, the grass is not greener on the other side. And also, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. We know what Donnarumma's issues are, right? But we know them at this point. We know that he's not the best with the ball at his feet, that coming out from corners and whatnot, even though he's progressed on them, it's not his strong suit. And as good as 𝙀𝙀𝘖𝘾𝑼𝘖𝘖𝑗 is and could be, there's sort of a lot of unknowns. I think right now you could argue that keeper for keeper, you could say that they're roughly the same. But it's just that overall, it's, I don't know. I'm just like, I can understand it from the sporting aspect in terms of, from Enrique's perspective, I don't think he's ever really been a fan of Donnarumma's game, and he sort of really played around him. So if you look at PSG play, we basically try to use Donnarumma as less as possible. We don't give him the ball 2 feet oftentimes. Sometimes, to play, to play on the other side, we'll give it to him. But I don't think he's a Lucho keeper. And I think that's something that, because it's not like this 𝙀𝙀𝘖𝘾𝑼𝘖𝘖𝑗's deal is, something that's just come up. PSG have been interested in 𝙀𝙀𝘾𝑼𝘖𝘖𝘖 for over a year and a half now. So you could say we've seen it coming. But then I think one of the biggest things, and initially what I thought it was merely contractual. So if you go and you look, based on their salaries, Donnarumma has one of these 7th highest salary at the club. So in terms of wages, he's earning 12.8 million euros, worth of 10 million pounds a year annual wages, if I'm not mistaken. I think something for that, most of that, it's 7 million comes from his wages directly, and I think 3 million of that in the 10 million comes from the fact that he came on a free, and so it was a sign-on bonus. And so that's perfectly interested. The issue and what was seemingly coming out, and where I would go and say even for me it is unreasonable, is that apparently Donnarumma was asking to have, be one of the best paid players at the club. So he was looking to be on like Ousmane Dembele wages, which is, 20 million a year, or Lucas Hernandez 19 million a year. And for something like that, especially, yes, as good as he's been in the last 5 months or so, and arguably the LEAVE PSG award, he's going to win that best keeper in the world. Yes, you can't also forget the 3.5 years prior where he's been, to be completely frank, quite mediocre and like okay and average. You can't just go and base it off strictly the last 5 months. And so if he's asking for 20 million at that point, no, you say thank you for your services, Donnarumma. Thank you for your services, Ďiďo. Muchas gracias, grande Ďiďo, but it's time to go. Grazie Ďiďo, but it's time to go. However, if we're talking about things like he wants a bit of an increase to, 15 million or so on and so forth, I can hear that. But the other thing that is also sort of hampering discussions right now is a new policy at PSG. So this is going to get really nerdy and really technical, but basically for perspective, PSG used to give wages out like any other club. It's fixed wages. You get paid a certain amount a week, whatever your sign-on bonus as well. You get paid this amount, no issues there. You get paid. That's it. That's the end of it. Your fixed wage, regardless of what happens, that's what you get paid week in, week out. However, what Luis Campos and, the higher ups at PSG have started doing now is that they're basically giving performance-based, wages. So you have a base salary, but then you also can get bonuses like at, many companies out there. So this means that if you go and, for a certain amount of games that you win, for a certain amount of, wins, if you're a keeper, the amount of clean sheets you get, if you win a Champions League, your wages can increase. So the baseline, you might be a bit lower, but the potential wins in terms of the bonuses could increase. And so seemingly the issue is that Donnarumma doesn't want this, performance-based, structure. He wants just to have a classical, normal structure of, I just get paid. I know what I'm going to get paid, regardless if we win or lose Saturday, Sunday, Champions League games, I get paid the same. But PSG, Vitinha signed a new contract with this new wage structure of it's performance-based. Hakimi, Nuno Mendes. I feel like I'm missing I think Morin Zaire-Emery as well. I mean, these are all players who signed this new wage structure. And I think the issue would be is that if you go and you give Donnarumma the old wage structure where he's basically just paid based on what he regardless, there's no performance incentives for him to, be better and whatnot, then you'll have your Hakimis, your Vitinhas who signed the new structure. I'll be like, wait, hold on a second. You guys made me sign that old deal, the deal where I had to, my wages or the amount of money I make is dependent on my performances. And now all of a sudden, Donnarumma is able to do it. It doesn't matter. There'd be an inconsistency in that. And so I think this policy of the club that no players above the club, I think we have to have that. However, on the other side too, I don't think it's a good look that you have arguably the best keeper in the world this season, especially given what he did for you in the second half in the Champions League to win you big games, winning you penalty shootouts, etc., so on and so forth, to go and leave him, boot him out of the club, basically over contract negotiations. Like, it's not Donnarumma wants to stay at the club. It's just that there's a disagreement of how much it is. And so it's a really tricky case. But the more and more I think about it, the more and more you look at it from a business standpoint from the club, it is also PSG in some aspects. I'm also proud of the club in that we're actually starting to show some cojones. Because previously in the past, when it was Mbappe time, so on and so forth, we are bending over, doing whatever they want. If Mbappe wants the keys to the city, he gets the keys to the city. If he wants to sit somewhere in the dressing room, we give him that. But now it's okay. Thank you for your service, Ďiďo. But guys, let's actually be reasonable here. Thank you for everything that you've done. But there's also like wages that there are some limits to what we can offer you. And I think that in terms of growing as a club, I think it's perfectly fine. And if Donnarumma doesn't want to accept that, as much as it would pay me to go and say it, you have to find himself a new home. It's tough. But then coming on to 𝙀𝙀𝘿𝘾𝘼𝙎𝙏, the thing is, in isolation, that's the thing that's difficult about it, is that 𝙀𝙀𝘿𝘾𝘼𝙎𝙏, if it was that Donnarumma had a similar half of the season, he continued on what we'd seen previously. Like if you told me this move in January, I would have said 100%, no issues. Donnarumma, thank you for your services, but you can leave. But it's the fact that what Donnarumma's done in the last 5 months, and on top of that, you've won the Champions League. He's going to be forever in the history of the club, the first ever keeper to win the Champions League for PSG. And not just, as a bystander. This guy, in crucial moments, right, against Arsenal in that return leg, in both legs, what am I saying? Against Aston Villa in the second leg, against Liverpool in the second leg, on the penalty shootouts. You can't just, throw that away. And it's the fact that, again, this address keeps ringing in my head. The devil you know is better than the devil you don't. ultimately, we don't know how 𝙀𝙀𝘋𝙀𝘍 is going to perform at PSG. One of the big differences between a PSG keeper and a Lille keeper is that at Lille, without being disrespectful to the club, you're not keeping possession, specifically in the big European games. You're not expected to, dominate possession, have, all the shots and whatnot. So for 𝙀𝙀𝘋𝙀𝘍, he's facing a lot more shots than a Donnarumma. And you'd ask me, okay, well, what's the correlation here? The fact is that as a keeper, oftentimes, especially for the nature of the position, some keepers at least, they need to be a bit hot. Like you need to be facing, shots regularly. It's like imagine in a game, if you are a player and you like a striker and you barely get a touch of the ball, you barely get a sniff of the ball. Whenever the ball does come, you're a bit like stiff. You're a bit like you're not used to it. So it's the same thing for a keeper. Like some keepers need to make minimum like 5 saves a game to really be in their mood. But the thing at PSG is you're only asked to make 3 saves sometimes over the course of a game. But you need to be there for those 3 saves. And if it's your first save that you're making in like 80 minutes, you're not going to be nearly as hot. And that's in some cases where Donnarumma did have issues. And the first game that comes to my mind is that game against Liverpool in the first leg where 𝙬𝙬𝘋𝙀𝘋𝙀𝘋 comes. You could argue that's a save that he should be making. And that had he had, faced, more saves, had he had faced, stiffer opposition, maybe he makes that save. The issue is that with, 𝙀𝙀𝘋𝙀𝘍 is you don't ultimately know whether or not he's going to be able to, be successful in those types of positions, in those types of scenarios. So let's say in a Champions League game, in a game where you dominate with possession, 70%, and he only faces 3 shots, is he going to allow all 3 goals? It's sort of stuff like that. So yeah, that's the thing. In isolation, it's a great move. If you just look at it based on what's happening, it's actually okay. But in the context of for PSG and what's happened over the course of the season, it's a lot trickier. But I think ultimately, for me, the worst case scenario that I really do not want is what Fabrice Hawkins said here, as I showed earlier on, is that Jean-Louis Donnarumma has not yet left, and it goes and says, internally, the possibility of seeing Chevalier and Donnarumma compete with Luis Enrique making the final decision is not ruled out. That I do not want that. This final line here, absolutely the heck not. If you're going to have a number 1 keeper, you have a number 1 keeper. A keeper is a position where you can't be going in, fiddling, haphazardly going, okay, you're my cup keeper, you're my, no. I remember we had this for when Donnarumma, funny enough, came his first season at PSG. We were sort of dancing between him and 𝙀𝙀𝘋𝙀𝘋𝙀𝘍 Navas. And even then, arguably, the other big difference is that it's not like Donnarumma's old. Donnarumma's 26? Chevalier's 23? There's a 3-year gap between. Yes, Chevalier's younger, but he's not, significantly younger. At least with, him and 𝙀𝙀𝘋𝙀𝘋 Navas, there's a massive age difference. Whereas here, right now, you're talking about a 3-year difference, which is not all that consequential. So I don't know. I don't get that aspect. And especially if you're seeing both of them together, it really doesn't make sense. Because at least if Donnarumma leaves, I could argue that, okay, you're going to be able to get, probably 40 million as a transfer, thereabouts 30, 40 million. You're going to be saving immensely on wages. If you just even go based on Donnarumma, what he has currently, it's potentially 50 millions in savings in terms of wages over, let's say he signs like a 4-year contract or a 5-year contract, roughly 40, 50 million in terms of wages. Whereas Chevalier is probably going to be asking for a year, 5 million. So you go say that over the course of a couple of years, that's 20 million. So there's those things as well. But the thing is, if you have both of them there, so not only are you paying more in wages, not only are you have 2 excellent class keepers, but then as a keeper, it's a position where you need to be playing routinely week in, week out. You can't be constantly having to check over your shoulder. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we've seen a better version of Donnarumma when he's not been competing for the number 1 role. I think every single time that you have had 2 keepers compete for the number 1, it's never really worked out. I think oh my God, I can't speak. I think you need to have a clear number 1 and a clear number 2. This hocus pocus of, you're my number 1, but you're also my number 1, and whoever's better. No, just have a number 1, make it secure, and go with that. But yeah, that's basically it. I think I've touched on all the biggest things I want. Again, to sort of wrap up, Chevalier, the deal, it's seemingly done already. I've heard that apparently by the end of the week, he could be making his medical visit. And Donnarumma, again, it's not that he doesn't want to leave the club. He wants to stay. It's just that the agreement, there's the negotiating, they can't find an agreement, right? Donnarumma wants either more money, or that's also a thing. I also potentially think that this whole thing of the money thing is just a pretext. I think potentially that Lucho and Luis Campos just were never fans of his style of play. Because you have to also remember that Donnarumma came in before Luis Enrique and Luis Campos came to the club. So it's not like they're their choices. So I think if he could do it all over again, right? I don't think we signed Donnarumma if Luis Enrique was our coach to begin with. So there's also that aspect that we'll have to take into account. But I'll be monitoring the situation closely, and I'll try my best to give you guys updates on all this. And yeah, that's basically the end of the video. Once again, thank you guys for watching the video. It's been a pleasure as always. Let me know if you guys do like these more, football newsy related videos. Obviously, there's not much football going around right now. And also another massive thing is that I've been doing, TikTok lives where I bring people on, and also on Discord. I've been going on Discord and, chatting with people there. So if you guys are interested in joining the Discord, it's the first link down in the description. If you guys are interested in hopping on my TikTok lives, make sure to go and follow me on TikTok, and I'll be doing live streams in there. But anyways, guys, thank you guys very much for watching this video. It's been a pleasure as always. And remember, stay safe, stay kind, and stay blessed. Godspeed.